You know, even from the concept of CITCO from Joe Loecy, we were inventors. We invented different ideas, different processes.
But at the same time, the progress was rewarding.
Cutting diamonds, all the lathes, all the machines, the grinders.
As long as everybody here kind of takes that mindset, I don't think there's anything that can
I still look back on those days fondly. They
They
were good
couldn't
people.
afford a diamond. They saved up. I'm going to buy you a bigger diamond every year.
In 1939, Joe Loecy created a legacy that has lasted over 85 years. The legacy has spanned generations, helped countless lives, and has innovated the machining industries over and over again. That legacy is CITCO. But who was Joe Loecy? What was the idea that started it all? Well, it all starts back in 1939 in Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, you want to know how it started? Dad was working for Thompson Products, which was the forerunner of TRW.
Joe Loecy worked for TRW in Cleveland. He was a grinder operator. They would use diamond tools, but these were subpar diamond tools, and the diamonds would constantly just come out of the matrix. The diamonds would fall out and be collected into the coolant tank.
They didn't know how to cut diamonds or anything back then. The first time they tried to cut a diamond, they bought a diamond wheel. They took a file to try to start it. And they went, and just put a big groove in the file. And he goes, well, I guess that's not the way to do it. But he was running a grinder. They were making actually valves for the Japanese before the Second World War.
So the diamond tools they were using on the grinders, what they would do is they would dress a conventional abrasive wheel to put a form or to put a flat onto the wheel, and then in turn that would grind the part.
He couldn't get any tools to work on his grinder because they were falling out and they were odd shaped and it'd be like this and like that and all over the lot. So Dad said, well, I'll go out and make my own.
From day one, this is before CITCO was started, he was already innovative.
Joe was a mechanical genius. He saw a need for a better diamond dressing tool. What they were using was crude and really not reliable. Okay, so Joe took it upon himself to try to invent a better dressing tool.
So Joe Loecy asked for permission, could I clean out the coolant tanks after the shift? So on his own time, he would clean out the coolant tanks, and he would then take the diamonds and he would start practicing, put the diamond onto a carbon, and then he would take a steel shank, drill a hole through it, adds a powdered matrix in there, and he would torch braze the diamond into that metal shank, and then he would break off the carbon and expose the diamond.
I think he made them in our basement at the house.
Joe was always ahead of his time, and frankly, credit him for creating the first rotary diamond dresser.
The innovation behind it was the powdered metal matrix. He had a group of chemists that came up with the formulation for some of these powdered metals, and we use some of those powdered metals today.
Working at TRW, Joe Loecy had the perfect testing ground for his new invention. And after a few iterations, Mr. Loecy knew he had something very special on his hands.
Well, he increased his production just through the roof. Other operators started asking, hey, your production's high, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm making my own tools.
Dad then was making a lot of tools for everybody in the plant. He made good tools and they were able to meet the production.
So he started actually selling them the tools. And that's where the concept of CITCO started.
And then the Second World War hit, and then everything went crazy. So then he quit there, and he started Cleveland Industrial Tool Company. But that's how basically he started.
It was 1939, and even though it was still the Great Depression, Joe Loecy was certain his new diamond dresser would catch on, and set his sights on not only more business, but also finally getting his shop out of the basement.
There's an opportunity here, not only to sell them at TRW, but at that time, there was a lot of opportunities in other companies. So he left TRW, he got other people involved.
He set up a shop on East 222nd and started making tools.
They were actually making all kinds of parts. He made pressure cookers for Betty Crocker. He made plastic trumpets. He made whistles. Guy came to him once and he said, well, I'll give you an order for 20,000 of them if you could make them for a penny a piece or whatever it is. So Dad invented a machine and they were making titanium parts and all kinds of stuff. The war stuff ended and he pretty much quit all the other stuff and just made diamond tools.
With CITCO growing fast, Loecy was having trouble keeping up with the demand. What he needed now was more employees, which was something his family was happy to help with.
It was my dad, Lee, which was Zoltan, my uncle Ernie, my grandpa, my dad's sister, Goldie, her husband, Willie, my mom's brothers, all the kids, Regan, Mike, all of us. He put us to work sweeping the factory. We made 25 cents an hour. And then we started sweeping them little by little. Once we graduated from high school and in college, we were cutting diamonds, all the lathes, all the machines, the grinders I had to learn. I ran that turtle lathe till my arm fell off. But he taught all of us how to do all that. We were a bunch of kids, but we learned. We all worked for Dad.
But even with all the extra help around the shop, Joe was struggling. There were some inherent slowdowns with dressing tools, and he just wasn't sure how to fix them.
There was no auto turner on a grinding machine. A straight shank single point, an operator would have to stop the machine, pull the dresser to the side, and at that time it was a crank dresser that followed a screw across the grinding wheel. They would have to loosen up the tool, take it out, put a new tool in. When you had to do that every hour or two, there was a lot of downtime, a lot of setup time. There was a lot of variability between a sharp diamond tool and a diamond tool with maybe a 30 thousandths flat on the end of it. And it could mean the difference between burning parts or producing a top quality part as it was grinding.
And then the idea hit him.
He goes, well, we got to be able to turn the head.
The turnable diamond dresser, which basically allowed grinders to index the head on the tool to turn the diamond as it was being worn. And if you did that often enough, it kind of self-generated the point on the diamond by itself.
First he seated it up on top, and then we crimped it on the back.
All that innovation that Joe was pushing not only made the grinder's job easier and innovated the diamond tooling part of it, but also cut the scrap on the grinding end and really started that progression toward CNC grinders.
But Joe wasn't about to stop there. He had other tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, well, he invented most of these tools.
Joe invented automated diamond turners to go on Cincinnati centerless grinders.
So every time the dresser would come across it, push in the valve, index it. You go across, come back, index it.
He also invented template following dressers to shape conventional grinding wheels automatically.
Joe invented the process for cutting a single point into a phono point. Basically, we had to center that diamond, and he used another diamond tool.
Take one diamond that was maybe like this, another diamond was like that, and he'd spin them. He had made a machine, and he'd rub them back and forth, and they'd come out sharp.
Today we would do that with a super abrasive wheel, whereas he was doing it with diamond versus diamond. It's just incredible that he can make that work.
Having innovated the dressing tool industry several times over, Joe Loecy was finally able to enjoy the many spoils of his success.
He loved to know how things worked. He was a collector. He collected watches, those old style big wheeled bikes, boat motors, typewriters, Rolls Royces.
We had 50 Rolls Royces at one time. Back to 1908, 9, 10, 11, 12, we had them all. I had all the Ferraris. I had hundreds of millions of dollars with it.
But Mr. Loecy was having a hard time getting Mrs. Loecy on board with their new lifestyle.
When my dad got married to my mother, he was 15 and I think she was 16. They couldn't afford a diamond. They saved up. The total was $100. He said, look, when I get rich, I'm going to buy you a bigger diamond every year. Now, she's an old Hungarian woman. She would knit our socks. I go, what do you know how much socks are? You're knitting them? And she said, Joe, don't take me to the store, you know, in the Rolls Royce. Because she liked to clip coupons. And she didn't like diamonds. So this 2 carat, that was the last one he gave her. He said, do you want it or not? And she said, give it to Roger.
And Roger himself was having a fun time making collections of his own.
Me and the Queen of England were the 2 biggest stamp collectors in the world. I had suitcases full of stamps. Then I bought a big house with the stamps. Then I bought a shopping center with the stamps. That was fun.
The 1950s would see a lot of change for CITCO. New breakthroughs in diamond engineering were only a matter of time. And though Mr. Loecy loved the 222nd building, it was becoming obvious that CITCO had outgrown it. It was time to find a new home for CITCO.
He decided to move to Chardon. That was in 1955. And so he bought 150 acres. There was an old dump in there and all kinds of stuff. So he built a factory.
Just off 5th Avenue on Industrial Parkway in Chardon. Eventually, it grew into 3 buildings in the same area. One housed rotary dressers, one housed diamond wheels, and the other housed our cutting tools and dressing tools.
And with that came a new era for CITCO. Over the next few years, CITCO would make an impressive push and create multiple new departments under Joe Loecy's leadership.
There's been a lot of things in our past that's really propelled us into the future. We developed the wheels, grinding wheels, to actually cut tools faster.
We would always just buy our diamond wheels, but then we were using so many wheels, we said, well, we might as well make our own.
In those years, we were growing very quickly. There was thousands and thousands of dressing tools. Those tools were eventually replaced with rotary dressers. And that department grew very quickly.
I think we had 9 or 10 diamond setters. Total department was about 21, 22 people, and we generated maybe $2 million in sales at that time. And then cutting tools was last.
Cutting tools works on aluminum and hardened metals, turning anywhere from engine blocks to transmission casings. They work with ferrous and non-ferrous materials. They true wheels is their primary function, or form wheels.
We made thousands of them.
And then a breakthrough was made. Research teams in De Beers and GE were quietly working towards something that would revolutionize the machining industry. And in 1957, they announced to the world that they made the first man-made synthetic diamond, cubic boron nitrate, and then polycrystalline diamond would soon follow.
Polycrystalline diamond is used to machine non-ferrous materials. CBN is used for ferrous materials. This is an enhancement to carbide. Like on CBN, if you're going to cut some hard steel, you'd get 10 times the life of carbide. Same with PCD, it would last a lot longer, so you could get 4 to 10 times the life.
PCD materials have a wide range of abilities, going from platinum, gold, silver, different grades of aluminums. And then you got the CBN materials, anything from hardened metals to wheels on a train, the big casted wheels.
Not as many tools were used for machining non-ferrous metals. Polycrystalline diamond was successful because it wasn't as difficult to cut. You didn't have to pay attention to grain structure. You didn't have to orient it on the grinding wheel to make it cut. Combined with the advantages in the marketplace for machining non-ferrous materials, it just took off in the industry. And really it was Roger Loecy that realized the opportunity involved.
And with Roger Loecy fresh out of college, he convinced his father that synthetic diamond was the future and began fostering a fruitful relationship to get PCD and CBN into CITCO's tools.
It's spread around so much between Russia and Australia and everybody else. But back then, it was all De Beers. De Beers was the original diamond mines down in South Africa. They weren't allowed to come to the States because they were a monopoly. And so they worked a lot through us. I used to have to give speeches, and so I'd cut deals and this and that. I'll never forget one time, we always flew on their jet. He said, well, we got to take some money into Geneva. Well, I'll just hop on the jet with you. I was sitting on millions of dollars. They just filled the whole plane full of money, and I was just sitting on it and flying all around Europe with it. He goes, well, let's go into the vault. Beautiful, red, 4 or 5 carat or 6 carat. He pulled out a green ball. It was this big. He said, you want to buy this? And I said, what am I going to do with that? And he goes, well, it's $80,000. It was a long time ago. Right now it would be $20 million.
But it wasn't just South Africa that Roger was getting involved with. He was seeing to it that CITCO machine products would get to the moon.
I met the guy, the president of Grumman Aircraft. So I used to go to Long Island, which where Grumman Aircraft was making the moon lander. We were building the lunar module. I had to develop some of the tools for the grinders. And we had to figure out how to get to the moon. And we would sit in a room like this, and we'd be drawing graphs of, here's the moon, and here's where we gotta go. I didn't know what I was doing, But they were listening to me once in a while. He actually let me sit in Apollo 11. So we would go down, I had to get in a white suit, they had to check me all out. I could still see the lunar module, and they opened the door. They said, go on in and sit in there. So we went in and sat, and I'm playing around. Lunar module, the one that went to the moon. But we would have meetings every day. I'd go up there, and everything was so tight tolerances. We had to make bearings within 2 millionths of an inch. You know how close that is? You breathe on it, it makes a difference. So we had special machines and special grinders and all that sort of stuff. It was a fun time.
As CITCO was about to celebrate its 40th anniversary, a big change was about to happen. With his son taking a larger role in the company, Joe was finding that their managing styles were pretty different from each other's, and they were both realizing something was going to have to give.
Roger made his debut at the plant, and frankly, while there were daily arguments, Roger and his foresight usually won.
He liked the more of the mechanical end, the dressers, the turners, the dress-o-matics. But then he'd send me out with a machine that didn't work, and he'd say, go find machines. And I'd buy a bunch of machines, I'd get them in, and he'd go, okay, now you got to learn how to run every machine. I go, and I said, you know, Dad, there's only going to be enough room in this place for one guy to run it. Either I'll run it and you go play with the antique cars, or I'll play with the antique cars and you run it. He goes, give me some boxes. Pulled open the drawers, he pulled everything into the boxes, poured everything, and he says, see ya. Then he played with the antique cars. I should have stayed with the antique cars.
It was the right move at the right time, for the right reasons. You know, I credit Roger with the foresight and the intuitiveness and the guts to move forward in that direction and really make the decisions that were necessary to move the company forward. And looking back at how fast we were moving, it was pretty amazing that he was able to guide the ship as smoothly as he was able to guide it.
Though Joe was still technically co-owner, Roger continued to push CITCO to new heights with new machines and new designs. He even pioneered their marketing with custom catalogs and advertisements that Roger made with his own printing press. But the world was changing, and as the company entered the 1980s, CITCO grew even larger, and Roger was finding himself in a far more competitive and cutthroat market that was pushing all of manufacturing overseas.
You know, it's just the competitiveness was unbelievably tight. And the capital expenditure to buy the new machines was so expensive.
It took a lot of cash to keep the company moving in the direction it needed to move. And at that time, I just don't think that that's something they wanted to do as a family.
We went to a machine tool show in Chicago. All the guys from Litton and everybody were all around, and they were making a lot of machine tools.
Litton was a huge conglomerate, making huge profits, and they didn't hesitate to invest in their companies.
They went and said, whoa, look at these wheels you guys are making. We need to be in the diamond business. So we cut a deal, and I sold it to them.
Roger and Joe sold CITCO to Litton, but Roger stayed on as a VP for the next few years. And so he still was in the inner workings of the company.
And we probably added more new equipment in the 4 or 5 years after they bought us than at any period that we were here. And that was really where the major modernization took place.
After 5 years, Roger was satisfied with the direction Litton was taking CITCO and felt safe leaving it in their hands. And so, after decades of running the company that his father started, Roger retired.
I moved to Fort Lauderdale for the winter. Bought the biggest house in Fort Lauderdale. My next door neighbor was Dave Thomas from Wendy's. We got to talking and all that sort of stuff. And we got to be friends with the people at Shooters in Fort Lauderdale, a big restaurant down there. So why don't we build the Shooters in Cleveland? So Dave Thomas and I went in partnership and built Shooters in Cleveland. 2 years later, I bought him out. So I went from diamonds to hamburgers. But anyway, back to CITCO.
It was safe to say a new chapter had begun for CITCO. And with new chapters comes new players and places.
I joined the U.S. Army in 1984, got out in 1987. Like most, got to start working. My father had worked at CITCO several times. He took me to CITCO, and I met Mark Rockefeller. The job that he showed me was a Cino operator, is what they called it, which is lapping diamonds. It was fine lapping of diamond.
I remember my first day I started, there was an ice storm. Because I started on Valentine's Day in 1990. I had an entry-level position called hand finish or roughing. There was probably 20 people there doing that job. Actually started when they first moved into the new building from the old Parkway.
We outgrew the Industrial Parkway facility and we moved to a building owned by Park Leasing, who was Roger Loecy.
He owned a building there less than half a mile away on Washington Street. So we moved all 4 departments into one roof.
It was 100 years old. Probably when I started, it was converted over to a manufacturing shop. It was dark, dreary, cold. The bay doors would be rattling when the wind was blowing.
You gotta remember, this building was built in 1901. They still had the old creosote blocks.
In the summertime, with no air conditioning, the wood block floor would actually sweat. It was slippery, it was sticky. The working conditions were absolutely miserable.
Sometimes get to 100 and 105 degrees inside that building. I remember Tom Toddy buying popsicles and passing them out to everybody because it was so hot.
Popsicles, ice cream cones, whatever we could do.
It was hot.
And as the 1990s continued on, so did the changes.
Litton split into 2 companies. One was defense related, one was commercial related. The diamond tools, the grinding wheels, Landis went with the industrial stuff. And eventually that division became Western Atlas. Refocusing continued, and eventually Western Atlas split into 2 companies. The industrial companies became Unova.
But shortly after the turn of the 21st century, unfortunately there were some dark times ahead for CITCO. Unforeseen decisions and the oncoming economic downturn would begin a downward spiral that CITCO probably wouldn't be able to recover from.
2004, 2005, Unova fell upon very hard times. Unova, anxious to grow, bought Cincinnati Machine and Lam Technicon in Detroit. Unfortunately, Cincinnati had no backlog for the coming year. We were entering a recession. Lam Technicon in Detroit basically didn't have any contracts for the coming year. So that put cost containment pressures on everybody. It required some tough decisions. I think Landis went from 1,200 people to 200. CITCO went from 210 to 140, 120, somewhere in there. Gardner closed the plant in Calhoun, Georgia. I can't say that was a happy time. So Unova started looking for companies that they could sell. CITCO, Gardner, and Landis were kind of marketed together, but eventually a company named FEV started paying attention to us. Everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief. We at least knew who our owners were going to be. We knew they had a good reputation. As it turned out, it was a decent acquisition for them, and it was a good move for us.
But the relief would be short-lived. 3 years of struggling to get back to being profitable, CITCO and the better part of the world would be dealt another blow. A housing crisis was beginning that poised to plunge the world into a recession that nobody had seen since the Great Depression.
2008 was one of the hardest times for CITCO. That was a tough and trying time for many people in our nation. Just as other businesses got smaller, so did we. The hardest thing for me to do back then, and for Mike Sweeney, was we had to lay off quite a few people. That's not an easy thing to do. I think the largest amount of people that we had was about 217 people. We were probably down to about 50. We had to take a look at ourselves and figure, how are we going to get through this? What's interesting is CITCO came from the period of the Great Depression, right at the end. Joe didn't let that bad situation keep him down. And when the 2008 housing crisis came about, we couldn't let that keep us down either. We had to overcome. And with the employees that were left, that's what we did. We took a bad situation and turned it into a positive situation by perseverance, and everything that we've learned from that, we are still doing today.
But it was a long road ahead. The first step was getting CITCO back on track, and Mike had a few ideas on how to do that.
We really had to work at becoming profitable, buying the right machines, the correct technology, honing in some processes. So Mike Sweeney asked me to take care of the cutting tool department as well. Basically, Mike provided the direction and I implemented it.
So really, that began the transition for the company. We came up with a plan to improve quality levels, make people accountable for their work in the plant, and to really source any components that didn't have to do with finished diamond tooling. And frankly, that was the beginning of what I call the modernization of our production here at CITCO.
But one of the biggest steps to make was finding a better building, one that would help them financially with a better lease, and more importantly, would finally have air conditioning.
The French turned to me. They said, Mike, it's time to buy a building. Bill Holbert and I searched the county, looked at probably 20 different buildings.
We landed in the Concord area and have a nice 45,000 square foot building on a cul-de-sac, and it's air conditioned. So it just made sense to make the purchase, and we moved in 2011.
That's where the business currently resides. Moving to Concord really improved the working conditions for everybody that was here.
Yeah, it's much better now than it ever has been. More energy efficient, not drafty. Thank you.
Much more pleasant to work here than it was.
And after a few more years, the strategy was working. The company was finally beginning to flourish again.
We turned it around, and once we did, we did all right.
It was nerve-wracking, but at the same time, the progress was rewarding. And just after we start to see the end of the tunnel, I'm starting to think about retiring. How do we plan for my exit, find somebody that would make the right decisions for the company? And frankly, Andre had been on my crosshairs for a long time.
But what about now? What about the future? Well, it all goes back to Joe.
Even from the concept of CITCO from Joe Loecy, we were inventors. We invented different ideas, different processes. A lot of the machinery wasn't made for lapping diamonds, for grinding diamonds. We had to invent the way to do that. As the technology advances, we're looking at laser technology. How do we make this laser work for us?
That's another way to improve our process. Closer tolerance, better finish, more applications that you could use that laser process on.
I think what sets us all apart is who is the one that embraces the new technologies. Those are the ones that are going to be successful.
And just as Joe passed his knowledge down to his son, CITCO continues that tradition and passes down its knowledge to future generations.
My first day here when I started working, I remember sitting down in the lunchroom and I sat at the table next to some people that had been here at that time. This would have been in the early 90s. They've been here 25 or 30 years. And they made me feel welcome back then. But a lot of those guys shared their knowledge with me. Our older employees really mentor our younger ones. They help them along, teach them their knowledge, help them innovate for the future, and then the younger employees just take that and run with it. I still look back on those days fondly. They were good people.
The CITCO employees are probably some of the best in the industry. They're hardworking, they want to do well, they're always trying to make things better. They are innovators, they are inventors. That is the culture at CITCO, and that's something I'm proud of.
Customer service second to none was one of the things they said in the past. But I'd like to think it's gone beyond that. We work together with them and try to get them to develop the best product they can. And when I say customer service, it's not limited to somebody you speak to on the phone. It's right along from the inventory controller to the quality guy and the shipping crew. It's right on down the line. We're part of a huge team here. One person alone cannot do it by themselves. We need help from everybody from the top right on down.
All the people, whether you were an engineer, a salesperson, working in diamond setting, brooding, or working on the E-Wags, they care about their job. They take their job serious and they want to be the best out there. They really do.
And everybody loves what they do, including myself, who's been here 34 years, and I continue to learn even today.
You could start out in the most basic of positions, and if you worked hard with other people, you always got new opportunities, and you could always grow.
As they do well, as they excel in their positions, it just opens the opportunities for further advancement for them, which bodes well for the company.
I still remember the Christmas card picture. We had a really horrible slowdown. Andre probably remembers this. I think it was in 91 or 92. And we were barely getting 40 hours a week, and we all gathered outside for a picture, if you will, the company picture. And I, at the point, didn't realize what they were using the picture for, but it was for a Christmas card, and that really gone a long way with our customers at the time. We were a really family-based operation, and still are today. We want them to feel a part of the bigger picture. When you look at a car going down the road and you see a Toyota, you go, wow, I made tooling. They made the part for that car. Or even a GM, wow, I made that tool for that.
I think the future is bright. And I think as long as everybody here kind of takes that mindset, I don't think there's anything that can stop you from growing.
As CITCO celebrates its 85th anniversary in 2024, our customer focus innovations are more critical and relevant than ever in addressing the new needs and challenges of a diverse global customer base and market mix.
Today, I engage the employees, try to pass on my knowledge the best I can. I have a lot of good people around me, really knowledgeable. They really mentor the new employees today and make them feel a part of it.
As for CITCO's future, it is fascinating in what was accomplished by CITCO in 85 years. Today, with technologies such as AI, laser cutting, it'll be fascinating what CITCO accomplishes in the next 10 years, let alone 85 years. Happy 85th birthday, CITCO.
Happy birthday, CITCO.